Right now, Hollywood is at a crossroads. Technology is constantly evolving, and with it, the way movies are shot and the way we interact with them as an audience. In 1968, the Academy of Motion Pictures combined black and white and color cinematography into one Best Cinematography category. Since then, only 2 black and white films have won the coveted award, Schindler's List and Roma. This year, a film will take its place alongside The White Ribbon, The Artist, and Cold War to have been nominated alongside its all-color competitors. As the debate between old and young, film and digital, CGI and reality rages on, we focus on a movie that used 3 eras of camera equipment, a unique custom filter, and a mysterious old lens found in a cupboard to help create a haunting, Lovecraftian atmosphere. This is the look of The Lighthouse. Director Robert Eggers says he frequently has an atmosphere for a film in his mind before he even knows what the story is about. In this case, the first page of the Lighthouse script sets the visual stage, citing, "This film must be photographed on black and white 35mm negative, with an aspect ratio of 1.19 to 1.
The term he used was, it's black and white with a cherry on top. I don't know what that means, but it's just a classical shot for black and white, high contrast, old school.
This story about 2 lighthouse keepers, referred to as old and young in the script, harks back to the 1920s and early 30s lighthouse genre films. Silent films like 1924's The Lighthouse by the Sea and Captain January being 2 such examples. Obviously, the black and white contributes to that, but Blaschke had to navigate whether to shoot digital or film to deliver the look he wanted, like nothing else that's been made in the last several decades. Blaschke wanted to create a feeling like early film photography, with the key focus being on texture. Blaschke therefore performed simple camera tests to prove his hypothesis, shooting 35mm XX film, 35mm color film, and digitally with the Arri Alexa. Eggers and Blaschke opted for Kodak Eastman XX 5222 film stock, a stock that came out in 1959 and hasn't changed since. It has a much more aggressive grain structure and great micro contrast, giving it that primitive quality evident in the film. When you compare it to color film and the Alexa color profile, it has what you would call micro contrast, 2 similar tones that mask the overall contrast to the other medium, like color film. In this stock, the local differences in tone and texture just pop more.
Black and white film stock has a look that you can't achieve any other way, and we wanted to have a look that was closer to orthochromatic film because that early film stock shows the imperfections in your skin, and so Rob and Willem would look more weathered and we would see every pore. So Schneider made a custom cyan filter for us.
For the first decades of photography, cameras could only record ultraviolet and blue light. Today, panchromatic film, which can see red light, is mainly used, but it wasn't widespread in motion pictures until the 1920s. If you look at the earliest photography, it looks different than black and white film now. Things that emitted a lot of ultraviolet and blue light were very bright. That's why Carlton Watkins or Timothy O'Sullivan photography has hazy, blank white skies. Skin tones are always very dark in those old photographs and super textured because they primarily reflect red and a little bit of green. Around 1870, they expanded the spectrum of film to include green light. They called those emulsions orthochromatic, meaning all wavelengths. Even though it's inaccurate, it's really just blue and green. This look not only evokes a bygone time, but further weathers the appearance of the salty, beaten-down characters in The Lighthouse. Well into the 1950s, orthochromatic film actually remained popular for portrait photographers and male subjects. It would make them look bronzed and rustic, like in this example, the famous Karsh photograph of Ernest Hemingway.
To evoke this time, one thing that would really help is this orthochromatic look, so the film would see blue and green and ultraviolet, and that's it. So the film is insensitive to red. Of course, red is a predominant color in skin tone. So your skin tones get really dark, and any fluctuation would be very pronounced, like blemishes, any little blood vessels, whatever, get really dark, because those would be more red, therefore darker. So blue eyes kind of can get eerie, like Willem's eyes, if you really look, are actually light and very pronounced against the pupil.
So achieving this orthochromatic look and eliminating all red light coming into the camera was an immense task for Blaschke. After testing a series of black and white filters and conventional color correction to no avail, Panavision came to his aid. The Schneider orthochromatic filter eliminated all red light to emulate film stocks that were predominantly used up until 1930, and therefore this makes the Lighthouse almost feel like an early ethnographic film. With the filter, things that have a lot of red in them, like skin tones, record much darker. You can see every pore and blood vessel in the actor's skin. The filter also emphasized blue and UV, so your skies get really blindingly light. If there were any clouds, they would fade into the hazy sky. This emphasis on emulating the past and having a look that transported the audience to an early film era began with Eggers and Blaschke's extensive movie research. And these contributed significantly to the movie's look in the form of its unique 1.19 to 1 aspect ratio. Having shot lots of still photography in a square format, Blaschke found it to be a perfect ratio of subject and setting. Knowing the sets would be confined, and of course that the Lighthouse is a vertical object, he found he could really scrunch the two actors in the frame with a lot of headspace above to really feel the ceiling and the environment. With this in mind, the team built the sets to suit that aspect ratio. For the sets of the interior of the Lighthouse Tower, they had to be able to move walls, because with an 8-foot by 8-foot space, you can't fit an actor, two actors, and their Panavision Millennium X2 camera and move around with them. Thankfully, this tight aspect ratio and cramped set contributed to this feeling of intimacy and claustrophobia. Even the furniture used on set had to be built to accommodate the aspect ratio. The kitchen table needed to be a certain size, so they could get a 2-shot on a 50mm lens without blowing the walls out. With the significant element of this film being the aspect ratio and the tight sets, blocking was of paramount importance.
No, fast, Dolly.
Okay.
Start reading, Rob.
Assistant slut lady. Attitude horse.
Rip. Okay, and that's it. Okay.
Blaschke notes that he and Eggers wanted to introduce the geography of the set early on. In the opening sequence, Ephraim watches the ship that dropped them off sail away into the distance, and then the camera follows him into the cottage and up the stairs into their sleeping quarters, which really gives the audience a powerful sense of the geography. Blaschke recalls the scene in which Winslow visits a sleeping Wake to snatch a logbook resting on his chest before reaching for Wake's lantern keys, and then pulling a knife pointed at Wake's throat. Blaschke placed the camera on the other side of the action and dollied between what Winslow has come for in the foreground and Winslow's hand. This eliminated the need for cuts to Pattinson's face while still connecting his point of interest. By moving the camera rather than relying on edits, Blaschke could avoid losing the tension through cuts. The more shots you have, the less each shot means. Each cut in the film then loses its power too. Another element which comes into play is the distinct lack of grip equipment. With this being shot 4 hours from Halifax, Nova Scotia, in a place called Cape Forshue, the crew were very far from support, and therefore everything had to be built. Quite unusual for modern filmmaking, the key grip became quite the source of DIY equipment creations, such as a homemade cable cam rig that ascended the entirety of the 70-foot lighthouse. This shot here, known as the Hell to Heaven shot, was achieved with the pulley system in order to keep it as a oneer. In this quite barren peninsula, the production team built a 70-foot tall lighthouse, attached cottage and outer buildings all from scratch, and during winter no less. Quite the feat given the treacherous conditions, an almost constant freezing rain and howling wind that seemed perfectly fitting for the subject matter, if not for the act of filmmaking.
We wanted this film to be in that shoulder. At the end of winter, early spring, everything was bleak. So what that meant for us is, of course, we were building everything in winter.
How do you lens a movie for 2019 that wants to transport its audiences back to the earliest days of motion pictures? To pair with the Panavision Millennium XL2 camera and the old film stock they selected, Blaschke wanted vintage lenses. Rare vintage lenses. I went to Panavision and said, what do you have that's off the menu that I wouldn't even know about? They brought out one lens about the size of a thimble, an early triplet lens. It's a lens type that goes back to 1840. A Petzval lens swirls out of focus backgrounds in a distinct way, and the effect gets very heavy towards the edges. This is not a subtle look, so we only use them for heightened moments and flashbacks.
I went to Panavision and, they had some lenses out. They said, oh, here's some Baltars. These were much cooler, just holding them up, which was good news because we wanted to pass a lot of blue light. And they're made in the 30s.
How appropriate that in the 100th year of the ASC, one of their members makes a movie nominated for the highest award of cinematography with the lens that was likely used by one of its founding members. Lighting proved to be its own challenge, as the cinematographer was shooting the film on a stock that had low sensitivity to light at 80 ASA. So to capture this movie, Blaschke had to fire an awful lot of light into the scenes. Breaking down how they lit the intimate interior scenes, Blaschke explained, "For night interiors, like the heightened dinner scene or drunken escapades, we lit those with the lantern's glow, which was outfitted with an 800-watt halogen bulb. Close-ups were further augmented with a china ball when needed. For daytime interiors, we mostly used airy M-series 9K and 18K HMIs, bounced through giant panoramas of muslin cloth outside each active window and shaped for mood. The moonlight exteriors were created from 500 feet across the bay by two ArriMax 18K lights perched on a 125-foot crane. Just above the camera was a 2K open-face blonde light that created a cool effect as it bounced off the rippling water. Everything had to be scheduled around the tides, requiring 3 sessions to complete the sequence." Despite the overwhelming amount of effort that went into everything from lensing to film stock to aspect ratio, Blaschke says a lot of the times the simplest cinematography techniques were sufficient. The Lighthouse itself had a turn-of-the-century Fresnel lens to help magnify lights and alert ships at a safe distance. To study the characteristics of it, Blaschke and director Robert Eggers visited a 1909 lighthouse on Point Cabrillo in Northern California, and then had a custom-built lens for the production. It was 8-sided like an octopus, acrylic, and weighed 1,200 pounds. I heard it cost $100,000, but if it had been made of glass, it would have been $1 million. Key grip Craig Stewart also built a turntable that raised and lowered the light, and gaffer Ken LeBlanc took a bulb and base from a dismantled 6K HMI.
With the Fresnel lens in the beacon and our powerful movie light, which was much brighter than the gas burner that would have been in there, I think that our lighthouse shone for 16 miles.
This is where things got a little hairy for health and safety, as scenes inside the lantern room had actors positioned in close proximity to the lamp. Even with safety glass, a 6K bulb was deemed too hazardous, so these shots were filmed on stage with a safer 2K tungsten bulb. Just as in The Lighthouse, the battle of old versus young rages on. With the evolution of technology, the questions will always crop up as to whether to shoot on film or digital, to use CGI or capture in camera. But one thing's for sure, cinematography itself will always be a critical part of filmmaking, using light, movement, and framing to create potent, moving art. Or in this case, a rusty, dusty, crusty, musty, black and white film with a cherry on top. Thanks for tuning in to the Hurlbut Academy's look of The Lighthouse. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another breakdown. Check out the link below to register at the Hurlbut Academy to go beyond film school and master the art of cinematography.